You're good at history, Elaine, but I'm writing the future now. That's what Trevor said into his headset mic, like we were all disposable voice actors in his little startup fantasy. I'd just finished outlining the buyer's revised term sheet, perfectly aligned, negotiated clean, no daylight between us, and a full cash deal. But Trevor, in his charcoal hoodie and Dad's watch swinging off his wrist like it meant something, leaned back in his gamer chair, smirked, and said it again. I'll take it from here. We don't need a dinosaur negotiating our future. He said it with his whole chest, on a live call in front of the buyers, our board, and the entire executive team. My face didn't move. I didn't blink. I just reached forward, closed my laptop with a soft click, and stood up. That sound, the hinge shutting, it was quieter than my heartbeat, but louder than any apology I never got. I didn't look at anyone. I just walked out. And just like that, 27 years of building this company died in a soundbite. If you've ever been cut down in a room you helped design by a boy who inherited your blueprint, then you understand. If you don't, well, count yourself lucky. Before we go on, if this story resonates, if it makes something in your chest clench or your palms itch, take 2 seconds to like the video and subscribe. Over 97% of listeners forget to, but it helps our team more than you know. Thanks. Now, back to it. The humiliation didn't hit until I was in the parking lot. I stood there, keys in my hand, staring at the car I'd driven to every merger meeting, every 5 a.m. earnings call, every impossible boardroom reset. I wasn't angry yet. That came later. In that moment, all I felt was the hollowness of having nothing left to prove and no one left to notice. Trevor hadn't just dismissed me. He'd erased me. I was the one who inked our first international licensing deal on the back of a receipt in Singapore. I was the one who rewrote the compliance framework that saved us from federal scrutiny in 2012. Hell, I wrote the employee handbook twice. But to Trevor, I was just part of the furniture. Mahogany, maybe, but dated, replaceable. He thought swagger could close deals and buzzwords could beat experience. I didn't go back inside. I didn't send a follow-up email. I didn't even take the strategic notes I'd scribbled with me. They could rot on that conference table next to his cold brew and unchecked arrogance. I drove home in silence. No music, no calls. Just the rhythm of my turn signal reminding me that at least something still respected timing. When I got home, I didn't pour a glass of wine. I didn't rage text an old colleague. I walked straight to the den, unlocked the bottom drawer of my old filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder so thin it barely made a sound hitting the desk. Inside was a single piece of paper. 1 page, no fluff, no marketing speak, just 1 clause. Signed, witnessed, notarized, 2009. And that, my dear Trevor, is when I stopped feeling erased. That's when I started feeling patient. I remember the pen his father used. Black Parker, fine point, always bled a little on certain stock. He signed slow, always with care. That night in 2009, we were both sitting on the same side of the table, 2 cups of diner coffee between us and an upside-down balance sheet. The company was barely hanging on, the market had gutted our pipeline, and payroll was a prayer. Instead of cutting me loose or offering empty gratitude, Grant Halden slid a typed sheet across to me and said, I can't pay you what you're worth right now, but when we make it, I want you to have the voice you built. That voice, 32% of voting shares, was buried in legalese under a clause marked Schedule 11B, activation triggered only if the company sold above a certain threshold, which, thanks to recent acquisition talks, we had finally hit. No one had touched it since. Not Grant. Not legal. Definitely not Trevor. It was written during a time when handshakes still meant something and signature pages didn't have tracking pixels. I had tucked the original agreement into a blue folder, a nondescript, slightly warped one from a forgotten Staples run, and filed it away under Contingency Elaine. Not ego, not ambition, just contingency. I never expected to use it. Honestly, I'd forgotten about it for years, but in that moment, back home with Trevor's insult still echoing in the walls of my mind, I opened the drawer and found it right where I'd left it. Crisp. Untouched. Real. It wasn't even that the document existed. It was that I had kept the original, signed in ink, notarized in person, and no one else had. There it was. One paragraph that now owned the next chapter of Halden and Co. The share option had never made it into the updated cap tables. The new legal team had no idea it existed. Most of the executives had been in college when it was signed. And Trevor? He probably thought Schedule 11B was a playlist on Spotify. The arrogance of youth is assuming history starts the day you arrive. I read the clause twice, then once more for good measure. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't change. There was no sense of triumph, no rush of revenge, just clarity. Quiet, brutal clarity. This wasn't a sword, it was a lever. And I wasn't going to swing it. I was going to wait until the weight on the other side got just heavy enough. Outside, the sun was setting, slow and red, like it knew something was about to change. I closed the folder, slid it back into the drawer, and locked it again. Let them keep moving forward. Let Trevor keep grandstanding. Let the sale process begin. They always start with the cap table. That's the first thing buyers poke when they want to see if the structure has rot. And sure enough, 2 days into due diligence, someone on the buyer's legal team asked the million-dollar question, literally. Can you confirm all outstanding shareholder rights and options, including legacy instruments? The email went out to Trevor's CFO, their GC, and half a dozen people who hadn't even been at Halden and Cummett long enough to know what an inkjet fax looked like. They pulled the digitized records, of course, nice and clean, streamlined cap table, annotated versions from the 2016 recap round, even a few redacted PDFs for show. But you can't digitize what you don't know exists. And that's where the cracks began. At 3:41 p.m., according to the metadata in the audit trail, a junior associate on the buyer's side opened a 2009 appendix, scanned, low resolution, probably OCR'd wrong a dozen times. Just an archive artifact, something Trevor's team had uploaded under historical reference, not material. And yet buried at the bottom of page 6 was one line. No bold font, no legal drama, just option reserved under Schedule 11B per deferred compensation arrangement. See signature page. That's when things got interesting. Trevor's people did what they do best. Deflect. Legacy clutter. Outdated structure. No longer relevant. They assured the buyer's team it was likely a phantom entry from before the Series A. We've cleaned all that up. One of them wrote, like scrubbing history was just another Monday chore. But the associate didn't let it go. Fresh out of law school, probably still believing in footnotes and truth, they filed a formal follow-up. Please provide copy of Schedule 11B referenced on P6. We need confirmation of termination or execution status. That's the moment the room should have started sweating. But Trevor? He probably laughed. We're not letting a typo slow us down, I imagine him saying. Swagger is a poor substitute for foresight. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed. Twice. First from a number I didn't recognize. Then from the CFO, Steve, an old friend who used to call me The Vault because I remembered every clause in every deal we ever signed. I didn't answer. I didn't even read the transcript. Detached anticipation. That's all it was. Not satisfaction, not glee, just the patience of someone who knows exactly what comes next in a play she helped write. They kept digging through the data room, through the clutter and polished PDFs looking for clarity, but the truth wasn't in the cloud. It was in my drawer, in a blue folder locked behind 2 decades of silence. I turned my phone off, closed my email, and brewed a pot of coffee. There was nothing to rush. Let the tremor build. Let them feel the shape of something under their feet, just out of sight. The real quake hadn't even started yet. Trevor must have thought it was still his show. The emails started piling up by 9 a.m., first cautious, then urgent, then blistering. The buyer's legal lead, a woman named Rachel Glass, finally drew the line. Until we receive direct confirmation from the Schedule 11B signee, all proceedings are paused. This includes valuation validation, board sign-off, and transitional access to proprietary systems. In other words, game's off. They couldn't move forward without certainty on voting rights, not when someone, me, potentially held enough leverage to block, delay, or reshape the entire acquisition. 32% isn't just a number. It's a veto. It's a board seat. It's a shadow signature on every dotted line they were hoping to draw in permanent ink. Rachel's language was cold and clean, no room for misinterpretation. Potential breach of disclosure. incomplete cap table representation, risk to transaction integrity. That's the kind of phrasing that sends investors to voicemail and gets CFOs fired. Inside Halden and Co., the panic must have felt like a rising tide. All those confident faces from the strategy call, the same ones who chuckled when Trevor called me a dinosaur, were now scrambling to decipher one dusty clause written before most of them had graduated. Trevor called me at 9:37, then again at 10:02. He didn't leave a message. Just the silent desperation of someone realizing, for the first time, that legacy isn't dead. It's just been very, very quiet. I didn't pick up. He emailed me at 10:15. Subject line, "Hey Elaine, quick chat." Quick chat? That's the tone you use when you're trying to borrow someone's charger, not when you're hanging your billion-dollar transaction over a legal abyss. By noon, I had 4 voicemails, 2 emails, and 1 LinkedIn message, all from people who had either ghosted me the last 6 months or clapped when I left the strategy call. I sat on the back porch with my coffee, watching the wind roll through the trees. The folder was still locked in the drawer. I hadn't touched it again. I didn't need to, because control isn't something you chase, it's something you remember you already have. Steve, the CFO, sent me a 1-line text. "They know it's you." He's rattled. Still, I didn't answer. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even amused. There's a stillness that comes after a long career of being underestimated, like watching a slow train derail, not because you pushed it, but because the new conductor thought speed meant skill. By 3 p.m., the buyer's team issued a formal notice. Please coordinate a direct call with Ms. Elaine Morgan, original signee of Schedule 11B, to confirm standing and intent. I read it once, then closed the email. I wasn't going to rush in and save them. Let them sit in the silence. Let Trevor squirm. Let every executive who nodded along to his arrogance now try to recall what exactly I used to do all those years. Before they stopped asking. Before they started assuming. I had no plans to return. But they were about to send someone who knew how to ask. It started with HR tearing through boxes they didn't even know they still had. Contracts bound in rubber bands, yellowed with time, half of them scanned wrong or mislabeled. Someone opened a records request with our off-site archive partner, Emergency Priority. The request code? Urgent. Legacy Equity Structure. That's when I knew the blood was officially in the water. Legal ran drills like it was a fire in the server room. Old lawyers were dialed back in, including one who'd retired in 2017 and now spent most of his days fishing in Vermont. He picked up, muttered something about 11B, and then apparently just laughed. One of the paralegals, a sharp one who used to bring me coffee back in the day, flagged a document with my handwriting, initials and all, next to a note. Executed agreement. See Elaine for original. They saw it. They saw it. Steve, the only one left who knew better, texted me just 6 words. They're digging. They found your initials. They look scared. I didn't reply. Trevor held a company-wide meeting that afternoon. No slides, no tone of concern. Just that gritted Hollywood charm he used when things didn't go his way. The deal is progressing, he said. Minor hiccups. Buyer side getting hung up on irrelevant paperwork. We'll get it sorted. Then he smiled, on camera, and added, never underestimate how sticky old files can be. Legacy clutter, folks. That's all. Legacy clutter. The same clutter that built the licensing bridge to EMEA. The clutter that signed every patent defense brief when the company was sued by a Fortune 50. The clutter that once flew across the country to calm a billion-dollar client who was ready to walk away until I made him stay. The clutter who knew the founder better than his own son did. If he thought that press statement was going to make the lawyers back off, he was more naive than arrogant. What Trevor didn't understand, and never would, is that fear doesn't come from a press release or a polished smile. It comes when you realize the woman you just dismissed owns the only legal artifact that determines whether your story ends in champagne or subpoenas. And right now, they didn't know which it would be. One of my old project leads emailed me privately. Just a link to the investor calendar with the note, Q3 window closes in 10 days, clock's ticking. I could feel it happening, the leverage shifting, molecule by molecule, back toward me, not from anything I did, but from everything I didn't do. I hadn't spoken. I hadn't responded, and in a world of power plays and noise, silence is the most unnerving sound of all. So I let them squirm. Let Trevor try to bluff his way through legal gravity. Let them chase paper in hallways I once walked barefoot at midnight to fix last-minute filings. The document was still in the drawer. I hadn't touched it. I didn't need to. I wasn't going to blink first. The email came in just after dawn. No subject line games, no fluffy introductions. Just direct and surgical, like any real counsel should be when a deal's bleeding out on the table. Dear Ms. Morgan, we respectfully request a conversation regarding Schedule 11B and your standing as its original signee. Your insights are critical to restoring forward motion. We would be honored to speak with you at your earliest convenience. It was signed by Rachel Glass herself, buyer's lead counsel, a woman who didn't waste breath or time. I respected that, and I knew exactly what it meant. They'd seen the truth buried in Trevor's spin. They weren't taking his word anymore. What they wanted was the quiet voice behind the architecture. I stared at the screen for a while, sipping black coffee gone cold. Then I wrote back one sentence. I'll join one call, recorded, with Trevor present. Nothing less. Send. It took 14 minutes to get a response. They agreed. Of course they did. When you hold 32% of voting rights and a key to whether the cap table is even valid, people tend to clear their schedules. They offered 3 time slots. I chose the latest one, not for drama, for discipline. To let Trevor sweat through the whole day, wondering how much I'd say and how much I wouldn't. Control isn't always volume. It's choosing when you enter the room. I didn't rush to find the document. I didn't prep talking points or reread the clause. I already knew the shape of every comma. Grant Halden didn't write filler. When he signed something, he meant it. And when he gave me those rights, he did it with full intention. Not as a placeholder, but as protection, for me and for the company. It just never occurred to his son that I might still be holding the matchbook. As the hour approached, I set up the call in my study. Low light, clean desk, the folders still unopened but sitting beside me like a silent co-counsel. No emotion, no performance. This wasn't revenge. This was a ledger correction. When the call connected, Rachel was first on screen. Then 2 of her team, then Trevor. He looked like he hadn't slept. Shirt wrinkled, eyes scanning the corners of his screen like someone had left the answers off camera. No team flanking him this time. Just him and the truth. Elaine, he said, trying that old warmth like nothing had happened. Appreciate you making time. Let's be clear, I cut in. This is a recorded legal meeting. You'll stick to questions. I'll stick to facts. Rachel nodded. Already recording. Agreed. Shall we begin? It wasn't a war. It was a chess match. 3 moves in, and I'd already taken the queen off the board. Trevor just didn't know which piece he was holding anymore. I placed the folder in view, opened it slowly, and waited for the part where everything changed. Rachel didn't waste time. As soon as the recording beeped live, her voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. We cannot proceed until the option holder, Ms. Elaine Morgan, formally waives or activates her 32% voting right as outlined under Schedule 11B. This directly impacts control representation, post-sale governance, and valuation structure. No more dancing. No more clever phrasing. Just the words that set the room on fire. Trevor's screen blinked once. He blinked twice. Then tried to smile, that same tired frat boy grin he used at company retreats when he forgot people's names. Right. Well, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. Some old clause from before the recap. We've modernized since then. Rachel didn't even acknowledge him. Her gaze stayed on me. Ms. Morgan, do you have the original document? Without a word, I lifted the blue folder into frame, opened it slowly, and angled the camera down. The 1-page option agreement lay flat. Signature from Grant Halden in bold black ink. Witness box filled. Notary stamp dated and sealed. My name typed clean across the top margin. No ambiguity. No room for legacy clutter excuses. I tapped a finger once on the paragraph in question. Clause 3.2, option to convert deferred bonuses into 32% of Halden and Cumber voting shares, to be exercised by holder if triggered during a qualifying sale event exceeding $50 million. Option shall remain active and binding unless revoked in writing by both parties or extinguished by acquisition under express mutual waiver. I looked up. This sale exceeds that threshold. I was never asked to waive. I never revoked. Silence. Even Trevor's mic stopped humming. Rachel clicked something, conferred briefly with her associate, then nodded. We've reviewed a scan of this clause. With the original now confirmed on record, we deem it binding, executable upon sale. Trevor leaned forward, face paling. But she hasn't exercised anything. She's been retired. She wasn't even... I never retired, I said, calm as January wind. I was dismissed without role reassignment. I never signed an exit agreement. My standing remains active. I hold voting rights unless I choose otherwise. You could see it dawning on him, not in a dramatic gasp, but in the way his shoulders sagged an inch, the realization that his swagger couldn't fix this, that the people in the call no longer saw him as the voice of Halden and Co. They saw me. Rachel clicked her pen once. Ms. Morgan, would you prefer to exercise your option now or delay your decision? I didn't smile. I didn't raise my voice, but I lifted my eyes straight to Trevor and said, I will respond in writing, after consulting counsel, but rest assured, I am fully prepared to activate it if necessary. Trevor opened his mouth, closed it, looked down. Power isn't in titles. It isn't in chairs or corner offices or carefully worded press statements. It's in knowing exactly when to speak and exactly what piece of paper ends the game. The screen dimmed to silence. The call ended. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel dismissed. I felt returned. By the time the dust settled on the call, I already knew how this would play out. Trevor wouldn't recover. Not from this. Not in the buyer's eyes, not in the board's. You can't call someone a relic on Monday and then need them to authorize a billion-dollar deal by Thursday. Not without bleeding credibility in every direction. But I didn't want to burn it down. That was never the point. The next day, I responded to Rachel with a formal letter of intent. Concise, professional, unmistakable. I would not exercise the full 32% voting block to block the transaction, provided 3 conditions were met. A formal advisory role, post-close with a fixed 2-year term. Board observer status with non-voting access to all governance sessions. Equity, 5% in the new structure, vesting immediately, not subject to clawback. I didn't ask for Trevor's title. I didn't need a corner office, just enough influence to shape what came next, and enough presence to make sure no one ever erased my name again. Rachel replied within 3 hours. Accepted in full. No red lines. The buyer welcomes your continued involvement. No haggling, no ego, just clean business. Because that's what real operators do when they see the keystone in the arch. Meanwhile, Trevor tried to throw a tantrum in the board Slack channel, claiming I was holding the company hostage and sabotaging the future. But it didn't land. Not this time. The board already knew the truth. Steve had been quietly briefing them for days, sending over copies of the clause, the recording of the call, the fact that I'd never signed an exit agreement and that my voting rights had never been restructured. Legally, ethically, practically, I had every right to the leverage I now held. And the board? They're not in the business of backing losers. They took a vote, 6-1. They accepted my terms and notified the buyer. The acquisition would proceed, only with my hand on the steering wheel. Trevor wasn't removed, but he wasn't trusted either. They wrapped him in vague language. Realignment of responsibilities, focus on innovation strategy, off-site strategic projects, the usual exile cloaked as promotion. He wouldn't be at the table when the deal closed. I didn't gloat. There was nothing to celebrate, just the quiet click of doors reopening. The same doors I'd built. The same ones they tried to lock behind me. I wasn't there to avenge anything. I was there to remind them what had always been true. I didn't want power for power's sake. I just wanted my name spoken in the rooms it helped create. The final signing took place in a glass room overlooking the city. The buyer's team was all there. Rachel, the new CEO, the integration consultants, they flew in from Boston. I sat at the end of the table, not leading, not bowing, just present, watching. My signature went last. Not for drama, just order of operations. The moment I wrote it, the acquisition was done. Halden & Co. was no longer a family-owned legacy. It was now a global entity with teeth, scale, and my name stitched quietly into its architecture. Trevor wasn't in the room. He'd already been reassigned. Special projects, they called it. as if that phrase still meant anything. Some off-site workspace, some ambiguous title, no budget authority. He'd fought it. Of course he had, but even he knew there wasn't a board member left willing to defend his tantrums. When the buyer's CEO extended his hand to me and said, "We're lucky to have you with us, Elaine," I just nodded once. No smile, just a stillness that comes from not needing the applause. A week later, my new nameplate arrived. Brushed steel, sharp lettering, Elaine Morgan Senior Transition, Advisor Board Observer, Voting Access. Pending Facilities had placed it just outside the negotiation wing, the very space where Trevor once kicked me out with a laugh. Same walls, same floor, same conference table. Only now it was mine again. I didn't host meetings, I attended them, quietly, strategically, not to run the show, but to make sure the show ran. Trevor came in that morning, not to see me. He had to return a laptop or sign something HR related, I think. But as he stepped off the elevator, he saw the nameplate. He stopped. Just for a second. I caught it from my peripheral vision through the glass wall. He looked at it like it had been carved into granite. He didn't come inside, didn't knock, didn't wave, just turned and walked away. And that was it. No public reckoning, no raised voices, just a shifting of gravity, the quiet kind where the air in a room tilts toward the person with the deeper roots, not the louder entrance. I didn't want him ruined. That was never my goal. I didn't want a kingdom. I just wanted my desk back, my seat at the table, my name spoken with the weight it earned. And now it is. So I sat down, opened a folder, and got to work. The future never scared me. I just wanted to make sure it remembered who built its foundation.